how do you balance the need for a concern with carbon footprints and for companies to go green with climate change concerns with the traditional bottom line measurements?
Excellent. I was surprised this question didn't come up earlier. The environment is usually the second or third question I'm asked. First of all, I don't believe that there is a dichotomy, there is a conflicting interest between caring for the environment and bottom line. If that's what customers care about and the business cares about the same thing, the bottom line will follow. And actually ignoring what your customer cares about is more dangerous, arguably. Let me start with an unrelated industry to the airline industry. The shipping business, where I started from, my family, the oil tankers, it was essentially a habitual polluter. Because back in the 60s, 50s, there was no environmental movement, so they thought it was okay to wash the tanks and throw the thing in the sea. It's a big sea out there, who cares? Nobody's going to see it. When the environmental movement developed in the 70s, they passed laws, they changed the systems. By the 80s, it became more aggressive. Then Exxon Valdez happened. I don't know how many of you remember that pollution in Alaska. And the law changed. And within a decade or two, the whole industry changed, the whole hardware changed, they scrapped the old ships, they changed the way it works, and now it doesn't pollute. And it's more profitable than ever. In the sense that if you do it in an orderly manner, you change your systems, your hardware, your procedures, over a period of time, it doesn't mean the profitability will go down. In some cases, you squeeze out marginal operators and the profitability of the good ones goes up. So I think you can have sustainable growth and profitable companies that care for the environment. Now, in the airline business, for the first time since I started EasyJet, I found myself on the receiving end of criticism about the environmental impact of a low-cost airline. Now, with your permission, I'm going to take a bit of time to answer this, in the sense I want to try a couple of questions as well. How many of you believe that travel is good? In other words, if we changed the rules, the laws, and travel was not allowed, the world would actually be a better or a worse place. So is travel good? Yes. Absolutely. Good. Oh, because you start the discussion with people who believe travel is bad. And it should be taxed and banned and forbidden and everything else. By the way, the last time people tried to do that was probably in Stalinist Russia. In places like that where they wouldn't allow people to leave the country. So I don't think it's realistic that, in the world we live in, all of a sudden traveling will be a sin, as some people have suggested. So the responsibility we have as a high-profile brand, because that's what we are, we're not the biggest culprit. Numbers about the percentage of pollution attributed to aviation is between 2 and 5%. And it's not that the numbers are dodged or are fudged or anything, it's just in the world as a whole is a smaller number. In the UK is a higher number. So let's say it's something between 2 and 5%, depending which geography you look at. Now, the biggest culprit is by far power generation, which is the thing that gives us electricity to have all these lights shining on me now. That's not environmentally friendly, by the way. It's motoring in your own car. In other words, it's all the people driving their own cars. So, I'll start by saying that if we really care about the environment, we have to look at everything we do and all aspects of our behavior and see how we can reduce our impact, our footprint, in every possible way. So taking the bus is actually more environmentally friendly than taking your own car. And then if you have to take a car, you can take a small car rather than a big car. The Toyota Prius is more environmentally friendly than a Range Rover. Now, most people can see that. They can visualize it. They've been Toyota actually marketed to them to explain it to them. Now, in the airline industry, we haven't succeeded in actually making people distinguish between types of airlines or aircraft. How many of you know what a McDonnell Douglas MD-83 is? If you see one, would you recognize it? Yeah. You see, very few people know these things. That this is an old aircraft that was designed in the 70s, it was built in the 80s, and there are so many of them still flying around. And it's order of magnitude about 25% worse than a brand new EasyJet plane built by Airbus. And yet people don't think about it. The other thing they don't realize is that it depends how many seats it has and how many of those are occupied. The worst possible way to fly is in a private jet for the environment. You know, I can't stand these world leaders flying into Davos every year to save the planet in a private jet. You know, talking about climate change, and they come off a huge aircraft that carried them alone with their wives or something. You know, so you have to be conscious of the fact that in everything you do, there is a more responsible way of doing it, a more environmentally friendly way of doing it, and a less environmentally friendly way of doing it. And people can be as if you like, devoted to it as they like, or they can mix and match. There are moments to be perhaps a little more extravagant or whatever. A very good proxy is actually cost, financial cost. If something costs more, usually is worse for the environment because it consumes more energy. So, and here comes the commercial. If you're going to flying a low-cost airline is actually better for the environment. Because per passenger carried 1 kilometer, the EasyJet plane, 85% full with the number of seats we have on board, is actually per seat kilometer better than the Toyota Prius. If you take the consumption, the fuel consumption per passenger kilometer. Now, some people are not convinced, and they're saying that we should tax aviation per passenger. In other words, just make it unviable for the poorer people to fly, because the rich people are going to carry on regardless. So I think that's unfair. That's unfair on some people. And it also has an undesirable effect, because in reality, the first thing it does is it empties the aircraft. It makes it more difficult to put more people on the aircraft, and therefore the same aircraft flies with fewer people on it. So the emissions per passenger have gone up. So I wish governments would think more clearly when they impose those taxes. What we support as a company is, we've announced 3 initiatives recently, EasyJet. Retired old aircraft. Just scrap them. When they turn 20 years old, they should be scrapped. We're willing to join something called the European Emissions Trading Scheme, which is a system where you buy and sell rights to pollute. So we must pay the cost of pollution. How many of you believe that the cost of offsetting is going to be, let me pick a number, how many believe it's going to be over £10? The cost of offsetting the carbons of EasyJet flights. It's actually about £1.50, who believe at current carbon prices. So create a market so people can see how much the carbon impact is in the offset. And last but not least, you may have seen it last week in the newspapers, design new aircraft that are fundamentally better. So when we come to the next generation, which is not too far away, probably about 7, in aircraft years, 7 years is nothing. So if you start designing now in next year, you'll get something flying in 7 years. So in 7 years, we can have an aircraft which is much, much better than the current one, which we dubbed eco-jet, basically, 50% better than the old one. Now, it remains to be seen whether Boeing and Airbus and all the others will build it.